And we continue learning Dear Shu Mishnah Brura, the halachas of Zimun, Siman Kof Tzadi Gimel. And we're in the middle of Sif Hey. We're up to the last part of, Sif Aleph. We're up to the last part of Sif Aleph, in which the Mechaber says, Umihu. Imaya Rabim Misubim Yachad. There are many people eating together, and you're not able to hear the Zimun from he that is benching. They're not able to split up into smaller groups because they need to bench together out loud. And here the Balabais, and the Balabais himself is makbid. Since they're not able to bench in groups of 10 because they don't want the Balabais to realize, but the problem is they're not going to be able to hear the Zimun. So we have a little bit of a catch-22 over here. On one hand, Balabais is telling them you can't bench on your own. On the other hand, they're not going to be able to hear. So they're allowed to break off into groups of threes. Says the Mechaber, quoting the Rosh, that's better than not being Yotzei Zimun. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Sivkatan Yod Gimel. And if they were able to hear, even though they wouldn't be able to hear the whole thing, they should hear what they could hear. Meaning they won't be able to hear the Birchas HaMazon. Excuse me, I read it a little bit like a turkey. They're able to hear the Birchas HaZimun. The Rabbi Isai and the Yishem, he's going to scream. But the Birchas HaMazon, they're not able to hear. So what do? What you do is you listen to the Zimun, and then everyone benches to themselves. Kavur Le'elsim Kuf Gimel Siv Zayin. If they're able to break off into groups of 10, then of course you're not allowed to. And this follows the rule that we learned in the previous year, that anytime you have a Zimun of 10, anytime you have the potential to say the Shem Hashem, you're not allowed to negate that by merely saying a Zimun of 3. Over here, you have a problem. You have a chiyuv of a Zimun of 10, but you have no way of satisfying that chiyuv, because number one, you can't hear, and number two, the Baal Bais is makbid for you to do your own 10. But Kol Ram Sevkat Tezvav Kili Lashmiya Berch Zazim L'Chol Asara. V'Yakbar Aleim Sevkat Tezayin, says the Mishnah Berurah. But Masha is a Chaburas La'atzman. He's a makbid, you don't make your own groups. And says the Mishnah Berurah, he throws in a line over here, a line that we saw yesterday from Chaim Kanievsky, but now we see it inside for the Mishnah Berurah. So yesterday we learned if you go to the chas, then you go to the bris, and you think that you're going to stay, and then all of a sudden it gets too long. What do? We said you're captured. There's nothing to do unless you had das in the middle, the beginning. Maybe someone will say there's implicit das. But now what happens if it's the var mitzvah? That you're going to miss. It's going to be yispatel mitzvah. Then you're allowed to break up into a group of 3. King goes on Magen Avram. If it's not going to be 10 without you, certainly not a leave out. Filu Lidvar mitzvah. We continue over here. However, you cannot be able to split up. As we just saw. Then he, the we learned in Zimun Kuf Bei Gimel. I mean, we personally didn't learn it together, but hopefully many people listening did learn Kuf Bei Gimel. Then nowadays we're considered Bikiyim, and therefore everyone should be mentioning to themselves, Mikol Makayim, you have to say every word together with him. And that's the right way to bench. And we're seeing here, for those who didn't learn Kuf Bei Gimel, this could be a chiddush, is that even though we're benching all to ourselves, we all have our own benchers, we're all saying benching. But when one is benching with the Zimun, the right way to do it is to bench together, Mila be Mila, and say Amen after every bracha. Till the first bracha, of course, you have to hear from the Mavarech. That's what we paskin is part of the Zimun. Come on, Zimun Reish. Therefore, Kol she'ein yichon lishma mila b'mila b'piyah mavarech hadazon is that kol. So the Mishmur here is adding on because the Mechaber seem to indicate all you have to hear is the bracha Zimun. Says the Mishmur you have to at least be able to hear the first bracha till hazon is that kol, and if not, mutav lohem lechalik d'shalish shal levarech lo shom. Below shame, it's better to break it into groups of three. Because the Zimun Medina includes the first bracha of benching. Me, Tonu has a loud voice. Call Hamit Subin. So before we go into Sif Beis, let's take a moment and see the Dirshu over here. Dirshu note number 13. Dirshu comments on that which we said. One is captured by the Zimun, but he has to go somewhere. And he can't wait to be misbatel the mitzvah. It says in Dirshu number 13, it's Masha Dafka, Mailis Zimun B'Shem, you're able to lose for a mitzvah. However, in Rashi Yachal Varach L'Atzav LaZimun, the Mishmur is a mashma that what if you're going to lose the Zimun entirely for the mitzvah? Sounds like that you're not allowed to do. Mishom, Shem Vatzaligami, Mitzvah Zimun Shed is Chayav, you have a Chayav, and you're losing that Chayav. We see in Kuf Sadi Beis, of Kontin Yod, we saw that. Chen Vatzafar Shmuel al Rosh, Chen Maskanis Archa Shulchan. Similarly, you saw that Kofisher Paskins, one who's in a large meal and he needs to go back to Yeshiva, Lili Mudai. You can make a bracha with 3 and not 10. However, you're not able to pater from a Zimun. Again, a classical case. Maybe someone has to go to a shir, someone has to go back to his yeshiva, and they're not finishing, so you can make a Zimun with 3. However, on the other hand, the Sefer Yosef Aimitz writes, someone who's eating a big meal and it's taking too long and it's too difficult to wait. Ibad Zmanoi, Oim Neshu Sarach Lakam, Lamachnas Baalim, but you got to get up early the next morning, or you're just not wasting your time. You'll add a bench without a Zimun at all. And he adds on, Sha'af Hu Noi Kach, says the Sefer Yosef Aimitz. However, if you're able to make a Zimun in a mannerism that's about Suda, won't notice, that is better. Derech HaChaim writes as well, more you're allowed to break over the chavura and bench by oneself. So we're seeing that in as much as there's a very heavy hand to lose a Zimun in Lamaisa, if one can make a Zimun of 3, that for sure is allowed in order to go to a mitzvah or a limud. And if it's just that one is he's just wasting his time. The next morning, he wants to be able to get up to daven to learn, and it's just taking too long. There's also a makayim to even bench without a zimun at all. But of course, we learned that the lechatchila is not to get involved in this situation, like we learned yesterday from the Gerus Moshe, to have das, that you're not going to be part of the Suda. But kamainis or efsin mamain, we're going to see there are days in the bais game, if you're able to finish your meal and pot yourself from zimun of 3, well, you're going to see in Siman Reish, there is a makayim to be mekel. Now, finally, let's look at Dir Shuna number 15. From our Shulchan Aruch, we see clearly that to hear the Berachas Zimun from the Baruch is the Li'ikuva, whereas Mishmur and Kuf Sadihei will get to soon, right? But if you didn't hear from the Mizamein, Shenemar Nevarech, you just heard everyone else say Baruch Shechanam Mishallah, you're allowed to answer with them. Says Rechaim Kanievsky, Chernal Lachais, that you're out to Yidei Chiva Zimun, and you don't have to hear from the Mizamein. Sefer Zimun Chasai brings the kasha on Rav Chaim Kanievsky from our Simin, that by us it sounds like you have to hear it, and they leave it off as a Sarach Iyon. Rav Tzadok Fisher says, you're not Yotzei, and he's even more machmer, that even if you hear the Mizamein, if you don't hear Bibir, you don't hear clearly his words, you're not Yotzei. The Chazon Ish wonders that the Mishnah Berurah and Siman Reish writes that Rak Bezimun B'Shleisha She'inu Maskirun to the shame, then you have to hear the words of the Mavarech Hatzoy Baruch Sazon. But when you have 10 people, it's enough to hear the Zimun alone. The Ein Nehim Strichla, you don't have to hear the Baruch of Azan. So Chazon Ish is bothered why by us we're not mechalek. This is the reason why you want someone to bench with a loud voice. Now, what about benching over a microphone? Says Eliashiv, says Fisher, one should not do so because it's not called his own voice. However, Shevet Alevi is Naitel Hakel. Why? Ikr din limud, we learn for Kishem Hashem, have an ekra. So you see the Tama Dover, says the Shevet Alevi. The whole point is to scream out. And therefore, you're calling out to your friend, and if it says the Shevet Alevi with a microphone, it's going to work the same thing. However, the Maskana, he says, Lechatchila, you should not use a microphone, because Al Yerabba is mashra, they should be able to hear you. However, the Gers Moshe famously writes, even though regarding Megillah, Havdalah, he says, you could be, I'd say, with a microphone, even though you don't hear the true voice of the person. Chazon Ish seemingly says the same. Whoop, I'm sorry, we just lost our page over here. 1 second. Chazon Ish, see the Chazon Ish, as the Michal Shloima, Rosh Zalman Arbach writes, regarding benching and Kriya Shema, we should be Meicha, one who wants to do with a microphone. Makam Acher says Ramesha, according to the Megillah, on a microphone, since it's not clear, Laheter is an Indian Chadosh, says Ramesha, we should be Meicha on those that utilize these new utensils. So Ramesha was not so happy about using the microphone. What many people do is that if there's at least the minion around the person they can hear without the microphone, then there's more of a makaim to be makel to use the microphone in such a scenario. We'll finish off with a quick sif beis, says the Machaber. Even if in the beginning, actually, you know what? Let's not do this quickly. Let's leave sif beis for the next year. B'siyata d'shmaya.